We're going to do the rear brake pads and rotor on this 2007 Chevy Impala. It's a really easy job. After you get the wheel off, hold the hub from spinning with the bar, and then take out this Torx head screw that holds the rotor on. There's only 2 bolts that hold the caliper on. I'm not going to struggle with these bolts. I just use a wrench and a hammer to impact them off. These 2 bolts are pins or slides that the caliper floats on, so it can squeeze evenly on both sides of the rotor when you step on the brake. The upper pin has a rubber O-ring on the end of it, don't lose that. You can just squeeze that piston, push some of the fluid back up into the reservoir, caliper pops right off. Set it up out of the way and pull the 2 brake pads off. They're just held into the bracket with a couple of anti-rattle clips. Just pull them right out of the clips. Two more bolts remove the bracket. I wanted to show you this ratchet. I really like this ratchet. It has a pivoting head on it, and the handle's a little longer than a regular ratchet, so it gives you more leverage. I use it all the time now. Here's the caliper bracket. We're halfway done. Now these shoes right on this hub are the parking brake shoes. They should last forever and ever unless you're driving around with the parking brake on. They have an adjuster on the bottom that you want to wind in, so just turn that sprocket with a screwdriver. A couple of revolutions is probably all it takes. Use brake cleaner to always clean the new rotor or drum that you're putting on, because it's shipped with a oily coating to prevent rust. If you forget to wipe that off of there, your brakes will kind of fade and slide. Now those parking brake shoes and that little hub that they're on is kind of floating assembly that floats around on there, and I like to take time to get it centered so that it's not touching and rubbing on the rotor. It would center itself, but if you take a few minutes to get it all centered on there, you don't drive away from your brand new brake job with a scraping sound. Put the little retaining screw, the torque sensor screw, back in there. Hold it with a bar so it can't turn, and you can tighten that screw up. Doesn't have to be too tight. Two bolts hold the caliper bracket back on. I just wind them in and then tighten them up with the wrench and the hammer again. Now here's how you can push that piston cup back the rest of the way in the caliper. I set one of the used shoes in there, then just take a C-clamp and squeeze it together. Shouldn't take very much pressure. It just pushes the fluid back up into the reservoir. Now this is some brake quiet product. It's like a silicone stuff that turns to a rubbery consistency. I put it on the back of each pad just before I put the caliper on, and it will prevent any squeaks. Lubricate up these slides before you use them to put the caliper back on. I'm going to put some grease on there so they don't rust and so that the caliper can slide evenly on there. Otherwise it'll just always push from the back shoe, and the back shoe will wear out quicker than the outside shoe or pad. So I grease those slides in advance so I can just pick them up and use them to assemble the caliper back onto the caliper bracket. So I'm just going to wind the last two bolts in, those slides, and tighten them up with a hammer and a wrench. You can use a torque wrench on there. It's not worth the effort to me. Now these lug nuts that go on this car have like a chrome cap stamped over top of the steel lug nut, and if you over torque them or if you mangle them up, those little chrome caps will pop off. And then you'll need two different size sockets to take the wheel off next time. So try not to damage or crush those. I always use a torque wrench to put the wheel back on. That's it. Job well done.